This war has been raging for 335 years. But how can this be? They haven't even fired a single shot. This is the longest war in history. But there's no violence, just endless negotiations and peace talks. So what's it all about? The answer might surprise you. This conflict began back in the year 1672, when the Dutch Republic and the Swiss Confederacy went to war. The war was part of the Franco-Dutch War, and the Swiss were actually fighting on the side of the Dutch. But they didn't last very long in the conflict, as they quickly lost the Battle of Corancebes and had to retreat. That's when their leaders met up with diplomats from France and Spain to discuss surrender terms. The Dutch wanted to keep the peace, so they offered the Swiss a deal that would allow them to retain some of their land if they agreed to stop fighting. But this caused an issue for the Holy Roman Empire, which Switzerland was a part of at the time. They wanted the Swiss to surrender all of their lands, not just some of it. So after hearing this, the Swiss delegation left the table and basically told the Dutch where they could stick their offer. The Dutch were outraged and immediately declared war on Switzerland. And that's when things got really weird. Switzerland and the Dutch Republic were two of the most powerful navies in Europe. Both nations also had strong economies, well-trained armies, and lots of allies. So neither side could gain an advantage on the other. So the war became a stalemate. This led both sides to agree to a ceasefire in 1678, which was supposed to last only 6 months. But then they couldn't come up with a treaty that either side liked. So the ceasefire turned into a full-blown peace, and we've been at peace ever since. So why have they kept fighting this war for 335 years if nobody's actually doing anything? Well, the answer goes way beyond just military tactics or strategies. It all comes down to one simple reason: greed. Since the beginning of the war, international laws and regulations have changed drastically. Back in the 1600s, it was common for countries to claim ownership over entire regions of the ocean. But today, this isn't possible anymore. If any country tried to do something like that now, they would be met with swift, legal action from the rest of the world. But here's the thing, even though this rule doesn't exist anymore, it still applies to ongoing wars. So, because the war between Switzerland and the Netherlands is still going, they are able to take ownership of any natural resources they find in the ocean without any consequences. In 1981, a Swiss research vessel was exploring the seabed near the coast of Africa when they came across a massive oil reserve. They estimated that the region contained around 2 billion barrels of oil. So, naturally, they took it. The ship transported the oil back to Switzerland and sold it for millions of dollars, and then they went out and did it again. And again and again. In fact, until today, the Swiss Confederation still owns most of the oil reserves off the coast of Africa, even though it's technically illegal to own oil reserves that aren't located within your borders. But hey, it's not like the Dutch are innocent in all of this. After the discovery of oil in the North Sea during the 1960s, the Dutch quickly set up a system to drill for oil in the region. Even though the Swiss technically own those oil reserves, the Dutch are able to use them freely because they're located within their territorial waters. That means the Dutch are the ones who get to reap the rewards of the oil instead of the Swiss. And believe me, it's a lot of oil. In fact, the Netherlands is one of the largest exporters of oil products in the entire world. In addition to oil, Switzerland and the Netherlands also have conflicting claims over gas, fish, and even underwater cables. For example, Switzerland owns a large portion of the seabed, where many important internet cables are located. And the Dutch are jealous because they want those cables to, after all, having control over important infrastructure, like internet cables, gives countries a lot of power in today's modern world. And owning cables that are located on someone else's territory gives you leverage in future negotiations. That's why every 4 years, ships from the Dutch Navy sail over to Switzerland's exclusive economic zone and cut down sections of the cables, leaving thousands of Swiss citizens without internet access, and this wouldn't happen if they weren't technically still at war. Of course, while all of this has been going on, many people have asked why the United Nations does UNJust step in and solve this mess once and for all. But the reality is that the UN can't do anything about this situation. Why? Well, because the Netherlands and Switzerland aren't the only two belligerents in this war. No, sir. In fact, there is a total of 14 countries who are still listed as being in an active state of war with Switzerland. And honestly, that's probably an understatement. You see, throughout history, there have been several cases of countries accidentally getting pulled into this never-ending war. For example, in 1719, Great Britain was at war with Spain. So when the Swiss Confederation started attacking Spanish ships at sea, Britain joined in on the fight. But then, 3 years later, Britain made peace with Spain. But that didn't get them out of the war with Switzerland. Because according to international law, if you're dragged into somebody else's war, you have to stay in it until the original conflict is resolved. That same rule also applies to World War II. Even though the Soviet Union and Germany made peace with each other, Russia still considers themselves to be in a state of war with the Swiss. And even though Russia and the US are allies, America has to stay in the Swiss-led war as well. Not to mention Japan, China, India, Pakistan, the UK, and the Ottoman Empire. Yes, the Ottoman Empire. As you can imagine, having 14 countries stuck in a never-ending war that nobody wants to be a part of is a bit of a diplomatic nightmare. Every few years, different countries try to end the conflict and bring everybody home. But so far, nobody's been successful. That's because in order to end the war, you need the consent of all parties involved. And that includes the Ottoman Empire, which has UNT even existed since 1922. The only way to legally dissolve this war is to somehow get the approval of the Ottoman government, which isn't exactly easy to do when the Ottomans have been dead for 100 years. So, the question becomes, how can the remaining belligerents put this war to rest once and for all? Well, to find out, I reached out to the Swiss embassy in Washington, D.C., but they declined to comment on the situation. Then I tried to contact the Dutch government directly, but they gave me the exact same response. That's when I realized that this story is more than just a bizarre historical footnote. It's a story about greed, power, and corruption. And sadly, it's a story that still continues to this day. The truth is, nobody wants to give up this war because nobody wants to give up the benefits that come with it. The longer the war goes on, the more money Switzerland and the Netherlands make. And that's why I truly believe that this conflict will never end. The Swiss and Dutch have benefited from this war for too long, and I don't think they're ready to give up that lifestyle quite yet. So, there you have it. The longest war in history? A war that's been raging on for centuries. A war that's taken countless lives, and a war that's made billions of dollars. But hey, at least nobody's firing any shots, right?